Have you ever woken up in a cold sweat, shaking from a dream so vivid it felt realer than your waking life? Don't brush it off. Throughout history, God has used the cover of night to send warnings, unlock destinies, and shatter chains. Here is the story of Isaac, and the 7 dreams that saved his soul. The scotch in Isaac's glass didn't burn anymore. It just felt like cold, amber water. He stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 42nd floor penthouse, watching the rain blur the lights of Chicago. At 34, Isaac had everything the world promised would make a man whole. The corner office at Sterling and Hearth, a jagged modernist apartment, and a tailored suit that cost more than his father's car. But on the marble island behind him sat a single, cream-colored envelope. It wasn't a bonus check. It was a petition for divorce. Sarah hadn't shouted. She hadn't thrown vases. She had just whispered, "You aren't the man I married, Isaac. You're a ghost haunting your own life," and walked out. Isaac drained the glass. "I don't have time for this," he muttered to the empty room. "Not this week." This week was the merger. Isaac was the architect of a deal that would absorb a smaller tech rival, solidifying his place as the youngest partner in firm history. His mentor, Silas, a silver-haired shark of a man, had told him, "Bring this home, Isaac, and you'll never have to worry about anything again." Isaac slept that night, but it wasn't rest. It was a collision, the first dream, the naked exposure. The air was sterile and freezing. Isaac stood at the head of the boardroom table. The mahogany was polished so highly it looked like black water. Every partner was there. Silas sat at the far end, smiling his shark smile. The investors were faceless, shadowy figures, holding fountain pens like daggers. "Proceed, Isaac," Silas said, his voice booming like thunder. Isaac opened his mouth to deliver the pitch he had rehearsed 1,000 times. He reached for his clicker, but his hand felt strange. Soft. Vulnerable. He looked down. The tailored Italian suit was gone. The silk tie, the Rolex, gone. He was completely, utterly naked. Panic, hot and prickly, washed over his skin. He tried to dive under the table, but his legs wouldn't move. He was frozen in the spotlight. The investors weren't looking at his quarterly projections. They were staring at his scars, the old burn mark on his arm, the jagged line on his knee, and deeper, invisible scars that pulsated with a dark light. His greed, his lies, his neglect of Sarah. "We see you," the room whispered in unison. "We see all of it." Isaac tried to cover himself with his hands, but they were transparent. He screamed, but no sound came out. Isaac woke up gasping, tangling in his high thread-count sheets. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. It was 4 a.m. "Stress," he told himself, wiping sweat from his forehead. Just stress. But the feeling of exposure lingered. That morning at the office, he felt fragile. When his secretary asked if he wanted coffee, he flinched. When he walked past the glass walls of the conference room, he checked his zipper 3 times. The Bible speaks of nakedness in dreams, not as a sign of shame, but of truth. Hebrews 4:13 asks and says, "Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give account." Isaac was trying to hide his crumbling soul behind a veneer of success, but God was pulling the curtain back. The day went from bad to worse. During a preliminary review of the merger documents, Isaac noticed a discrepancy. A sub-account in the Cayman Islands that didn't match the ledger. It was small, easily missed. But Isaac had an eye for detail. It was a signature. Silas's signature. He froze. If he pulled this thread, the merger would collapse. Silas would be ruined. Isaac's promotion would vanish. "It's nothing," he whispered. "An accounting error." He shoved the file into his drawer, locking it. He chose to stay blind. That night, God sent the second dream. The second dream, the great fall. Isaac was standing on the edge of the Sterling and Hearth building. The wind whipped his hair, howling with a voice that sounded like Sarah's crying. Below him, the city was a grid of uncaring lights. Suddenly, the concrete beneath his feet turned to sand. It crumbled. He fell. The sensation was hyper-realistic. The stomach-churning drop, the rush of air. He flailed, clawing at the air, trying to grab a ledge, a pipe, anything. He saw windows flashing by, snapshots of his life. Him ignoring his father's calls, him skipping church, him lying to Sarah. As the ground rushed up to meet him, certain death, a voice spoke. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the wind. "Stop fighting the fall, Isaac. I'll die," he screamed. "You are already dead. Spread your arms." The pavement was inches away. In a moment of terrified surrender, Isaac stopped thrashing. He closed his eyes and spread his arms like a cross. Ideally, he should have smashed into the street. Instead, the moment he surrendered, the wind caught him. He wasn't falling anymore. He was floating, suspended just inches above the asphalt. He woke up on the floor of his bedroom, having rolled out of bed. His chest heaved. Dreams of falling often represent a loss of control, but in a biblical context, they are a demand for surrender. Isaac was holding on to his life so tightly he was strangling it. God was telling him, the only way to survive the crash is to stop trying to save yourself. 2 days before the final merger signing. Isaac looked like a man haunting his own funeral. Dark circles bruised his eyes. He hadn't called Sarah. He hadn't called anyone. He sat in his office, the locked drawer staring at him. The discrepancy in the files wasn't an error. He had dug deeper. It was embezzlement. Silas had been siphoning millions from the pension fund of the company they were acquiring. If the merger went through, the theft would be buried, and hundreds of retirees would lose everything in 5 years. If Isaac spoke up, he destroyed his career. If he stayed silent, he became a thief. Silas walked in, clapping a heavy hand on Isaac's shoulder. "Big day coming, son. You look a little shaky. Cold feet?" Isaac looked at the man he had idolized for a decade. He saw the shark smile. "Just tired, Silas. It's a lot of paperwork. That's why you're the best," Silas winked. "You handle the details. I handle the vision. We're a team. Like family." Family. The word tasted like ash. Isaac went home early, intending to drink himself into a stupor. But he fell asleep on the couch before he could uncork the bottle. The third dream didn't wait for deep REM sleep. It hit him immediately. The third dream, the unstoppable storm. He was in a small wooden fishing boat in the middle of a black ocean. The sky was the color of a bruise, purple and black. Lightning didn't strike from the sky. It seemed to erupt from the water. Waves the size of skyscrapers rose up. Isaac grabbed the tiller, trying to steer the boat into the waves, using every ounce of his nautical knowledge. But the rudder snapped off in his hands. The water began to fill the boat. It was cold and smelled of old ink and money. He bailed frantically with a bucket, but for every gallon he threw out, 10 crashed in. "I can fix this," he screamed at the storm. "I just need a plan." Then he saw him. Sleeping in the back of the boat, unbothered by the chaos, was a figure wrapped in a simple cloak. It wasn't a generic figure. It was a presence of absolute peace. Isaac realized he wasn't afraid of the storm anymore. He was afraid of the man sleeping through it. The boat capsized. Isaac went under. The water filled his lungs. He was drowning in the ink. As everything went black, he heard the voice again. "Peace, be still." Isaac woke up, coughing, his throat burning as if he really had swallowed salt water. The silence of the apartment was deafening. This was the dream of the storm. Just as the disciples panicked on the Sea of Galilee, Isaac was realizing that his vessel, his career, his intellect, his strategies, was insufficient for the chaos approaching. God was showing him that the storm was unavoidable. It wasn't about steering the boat. It was about who was in the boat with him. And right now, Isaac was alone. He couldn't go back to sleep. He paced the apartment. It was 3 a.m. He got in his car and drove. He didn't know where he was going until he saw the familiar, rusty steeple of a small chapel on the outskirts of the city. It was his father's church. Isaac hadn't spoken to his father, Arthur, in 3 years. Arthur was a former alcoholic who had found God and become a pastor of a broken church for broken people. Isaac, in his arrogance, had despised his father's poverty and his crutch of religion. He parked across the street, watching the dark building. He couldn't go in. Pride was a heavy door. He reclined the seat, exhausted, and drifted off for a mere 20 minutes. But in that short burst, the fourth dream came. The fourth dream. The corridor of doors. Isaac was running down a long, hospital-white corridor. It stretched into infinity. On both sides were doors, hundreds of them. They were labeled with golden plaques. CEO, wealth, reconciliation, status. He ran towards the door marked CEO. As he reached for the handle, it slammed shut with the sound of a gunshot. Locked. He turned to the door marked Sarah. He pounded on it. Locked. He ran faster. Our doors were slamming shut ahead of him, one by one. Bam, bam, bam. The corridor was getting darker. He was running out of options. The lights flickered and died, leaving him in total darkness. Except for one light. At the very end of the hall, a single, humble, wooden door stood slightly ajar. Light spilled from the crack, illuminating the floor. It wasn't a grand door. It was old, scratched, and beat up. It looked exactly like the front door of his father's church. Isaac walked toward it. He didn't want to go through it. It looked too small. He would have to stoop to enter. He would have to crawl. He heard the sound of chains rattling behind him in the dark. Something was chasing him now. The only way out was the small, humble door. He woke with a start as a delivery truck rumbled past his car. The sun was beginning to bleed grey light over the horizon. Isaac looked at the church across the street. The lights inside were turning on. Arthur was there early, preparing for the midweek prayer service. The dream of the locked door is God's way of redirection. Revelation 3:8 says, "See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut." But often, God shuts every other door, the promotion, the relationship, the easy way out, to force us through the only one that leads to life. Isaac realized the open door wasn't the merger. The merger was a trap. The open door was right there, across the street, requiring him to swallow his pride. He opened the car door. The morning air was cold. He crossed the street. His hand trembled as he reached for the church handle, the real-life version of the wooden door from his dream. It was unlocked. Inside, the sanctuary smelled of floor wax and old hymnals. Arthur was at the front, arranging chairs. He looked older, frailer, but his eyes were bright. He stopped when he saw the silhouette in the doorway. "Isaac?" Arthur's voice cracked. Isaac wanted to maintain his composure. He wanted to negotiate. But the image of the nakedness, the fall, the storm, and the slamming doors crashed into him at once. "Dad," Isaac said, his voice breaking into a sob, "I'm in trouble. I think God is hunting me." Arthur didn't ask about the job or the suit or the fancy car. He walked down the aisle and wrapped his arms around his son. "He's not hunting you to kill you, son," Arthur whispered, holding Isaac as he wept. "He's hunting you to bring you home. Tell me everything." And Isaac did. He told him about Sarah. He told him about the dreams. And then he told him about the Cayman accounts and Silas. Arthur listened, his face hardening. "You know what you have to do, Isaac. That fourth dream. The door is open, but you have to walk through it. And walking through it means telling the truth, even if it costs you everything." "It will destroy my life," Isaac said, wiping his eyes. "No," Arthur corrected. "It will destroy your lie. Your life is just beginning." Isaac stood up. He felt a strange sensation. The fear was still there, but the panic was gone. He had a decision to make. He drove back to the city. He didn't go to his office. He went to the district attorney's office. But the enemy doesn't give up ground easily. As Isaac sat in the waiting room to turn himself and his boss in, a wave of exhaustion hit him. He closed his eyes for a second, and the fifth dream assaulted him, violent and visceral. The fifth dream, the serpent's coil. Isaac sat in the waiting room of the district attorney's office, his head in his hands. The fluorescent lights hummed like angry hornets. His eyes closed for just a second, and the darkness took him. He was no longer in the office. He was back in his penthouse, but the windows were boarded up. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur and rot. In the corner, a shadow detached itself from the wall. It wasn't a man. It was a serpent, thick as a tree trunk, with scales that shimmered like black diamonds. It didn't strike. It slithered slowly, wrapping its coils around Isaac's chest. It squeezed, not enough to kill him instantly, but enough to make every breath a battle. The serpent brought its face close to Isaac's. It had Silas's eyes. "You think you can leave?" the serpent hissed, its voice vibrating in Isaac's ribcage. "You belong to the pit. Speak, and I will crush you. Silence is your only shield." The pressure increased. Ribs groaned. Isaac gasped. I belong to God." The serpent laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "God is not here, boy. Only leverage." The snake opened its jaws to swallow his head whole. Isaac jolted awake, knocking over a stack of magazines. The receptionist stared at him. His heart was beating so hard he thought it might be visible through his shirt. This was the dream of intimidation. In the Bible, whenever a deliverer steps forward, like Moses or Elijah, the enemy attacks with fear before the victory. The dream wasn't a prediction of defeat. It was a sign that Isaac was dangerous to the darkness. The enemy only shouts when he is losing ground. Isaac stood up. His legs felt like lead, but his spirit felt strangely light. The fear was there, yes, but the paralysis was gone. "Mr. Harth," the assistant DA called from the doorway. Isaac walked through the door. "I'm ready to talk." The fallout. The next 3 weeks were a blur of chaos. Isaac didn't just light a match. He dropped a nuclear bomb on Chicago's financial district. The FBI raided Sterling and Harth at dawn on a Tuesday. Silas was arrested in his pajamas, shouting threats at the cameras. Because Isaac had come forward, he was granted partial immunity. But the consequences were still catastrophic. The press crucified him. "Whistleblower or accomplice?" the headlines screamed. Sterling and Harth sued him for breach of contract before the government shut them down. His assets were frozen. The bank foreclosed on the penthouse. The leased sports car was towed while he watched from the sidewalk. He lost everything. His status, his money, his friends. Homeless and broke, Isaac moved into the small, drafty guest room of his father's rectory. It was a humiliating fall from the 42nd floor to a room that smelled of damp wool and old Bibles. For 2 months, silence reigned. No job offers, no calls from Sarah. Just the endless grey loop of legal depositions and the quiet hum of his father praying in the next room. That's when the 6th dream came. The hardest one. The 6th dream, the dry bones. Isaac was standing in a desert. The sun was a white-hot coin in the sky. The ground was cracked clay, stretching out for miles in every direction. There was no water, no shade, no life. In his hand, he held a shovel. "Dig," a voice said from the sky. It wasn't angry, it was just factual. Isaac dug. The ground was like concrete. Blisters formed on his hands, popped and bled. He dug for hours, days, years. He created a hole 3 feet deep, but found only dust. "Why?" Isaac screamed at the burning sky. "I did the right thing. I told the truth. Why am I here? Where is the reward?" The sky didn't answer. The silence was heavy and suffocating. He threw down the shovel. "I'm done. I quit." He turned to walk away, but his father appeared in the desert, looking exactly as he did in life. Arthur picked up the shovel Isaac had dropped. "Faith isn't a transaction, Isaac," Arthur said softly. "It's a transformation. You are in the wilderness not because God has abandoned you, but because he is emptying you. He cannot fill a cup. that is already full of itself. Arthur handed the shovel back. Dig until you hit the water. It's there. You just can't see it yet. Isaac took the shovel. He struck the earth again. He woke up crying, not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. This was the dream of ***, the wilderness ***. Every biblical hero, David, Joseph, Paul, spent time in the wilderness. It is the place between the promise and the palace. It is where God strips away the reliance on self. Isaac realized he had been waiting for God to pay him back for his honesty. He was treating righteousness like a vending machine. The next morning, Isaac stopped looking for CEO jobs. He stopped checking the news. He put on a pair of work boots and went to the back of the church. The garden was overgrown with weeds. He started digging. 6 months passed. Isaac looked different. He had lost 20 pounds of soft corporate weight and replaced it with lean muscle. His skin was tanned from working outside. He was currently the janitor and groundskeeper for his father's church. He had never been poorer. He had never been happier. The legal storm was finally clearing. Silas had taken a plea deal, admitting to the embezzlement and the cartel ties that Isaac had suspected. Isaac was officially cleared of criminal charges, though his reputation on Wall Street was ash. It was a Tuesday afternoon when a black sedan pulled up to the crumbling curb of the church. Isaac was painting the front railing, sweat dripping down his nose. He wiped his hands on a rag as the car door opened. It was Sarah. She stood there, looking out of place in her designer heels against the cracked pavement. She looked at the church, then at Isaac in his paint-stained t-shirt. "You're hard to find," she said. Her voice was guarded. "I'm not hiding anymore," Isaac replied. He didn't try to charm her. He didn't apologize for his clothes. He just stood there, grounded. Sarah walked closer. She studied his face, the lines of stress that were gone, the eyes that were clear. "I watched the trial," she said. "I saw what you did. You destroyed your own life to save those pensioners." "I destroyed my lie," Isaac corrected, echoing his father's words. "I think I'm finally finding my life." She reached into her purse. Isaac braced himself, expecting the divorce papers. She pulled out a simple, white envelope. "You left this on the counter the day you walked out," she said. It was the petition she had served him months ago. She tore it in half, then in quarters. She let the pieces fall onto the freshly painted pavement. "I didn't want a CEO, Isaac," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I just wanted my husband. I wanted a man who could tell the truth." Isaac dropped the rag. He closed the distance between them and held her. It wasn't the desperate embrace of the falling man from his second dream. It was the solid, anchoring hold of a man who had survived the storm. That night, sleeping in his small single bed, with the promise of reconciliation hanging in the air like perfume, God sent the final dream. The seventh dream, the golden rain. Isaac was back in the desert from the sixth dream. The hole he had dug was still there, dry and dusty. But the sky was changing. The white-hot sun was covered by thick, heavy clouds, clouds heavy with blessing. Thunder rumbled, but it sounded like music. The first drop hit Isaac's face. It was warm. Then the heavens opened. But it wasn't just water. The rain made the desert floor bloom instantly. Green shoots exploded from the cracked earth. In seconds, the dry hole he had dug filled with crystal clear water, overflowing into a river that carved a path through the wasteland. Trees sprang up along the riverbanks, fruit trees, heavy with harvest. People started coming out of the wilderness. Broken people, hungry people, lost people. They drank from the river Isaac's digging had prepared. They ate the fruit. Isaac looked at his hands. They were no longer blistered. They were glowing with light. A voice spoke, filling the entire horizon. "You surrendered the kingdom of man. Now, inherit the kingdom of God. What you sow in tears, you shall reap in joy." Isaac looked up and laughed, the rain soaking him to the bone. The awakening Isaac woke up. It was dawn. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains, painting the room in gold. He didn't rush. He lay there, letting the promise of the dream settle into his marrow. The number 7 is the biblical number of completion and perfection. The cycle was finished. The old Isaac was dead. The new Isaac was ready. He got up, made coffee for his father, and sat on the church steps. 2 weeks later, Isaac didn't go back to Wall Street. Instead, he and Sarah launched a new consultancy firm. It was small. It operated out of a rented room above a bakery. Their mission wasn't profit maximization. It was corporate redemption. Helping failing, corrupt companies restructure ethically, saving jobs and restoring integrity. They didn't make millions. They drove a used Honda. But every night, Isaac slept the sleep of the just. The dreams stopped. He didn't need them anymore. The message had been delivered. The warning was heeded. The transformation was complete. God speaks in whispers, but sometimes, when we are too deafened by the world, he speaks in dreams. Isaac's 7 dreams were not just for him. They are a map for anyone trapped in a life that looks good on the outside, but is rotting on the inside. From the naked exposure of our sins to the terror of the storm, from the painful stripping of the wilderness to the glorious reign of restoration, the path is the same. You have to lose the life you built to find the life you were made for. If you are seeing signs, if you are having dreams that shake you, do not ignore them. The Tower of Babel you are building will fall. The question is, will you be inside it when it crumbles, or will you surrender and let God catch you? Isaac chose the fall, and in falling, he learned to fly. Do you feel like God is trying to wake you up before it's too late? If this story resonated with your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button to help this message reach others who are lost in the storm. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story of redemption. Share this video with someone who needs hope today. God bless you.